Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, for many students heading off to college, it's an adventure. Getting out of home for the first time, living away, but imagine if your adventures took you halfway around the world. Today I have the honor of visiting with Nellie Bennett, who is the author of a book that all freshmen at Missouri Southern State University have read, Only in Spain. Thank you for joining me today on the program.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so thrilling to be here.
And I think let the audience know that you are here and you're having a chance to meet the students, visit campus, that, tying into your book, Only in Spain. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule while you're here today.
Oh, thank you. I've had such a wonderful day meeting all the students.
Well, I know your book, for people who are in the community, this book was written by you, and it's something that we call a common reader for students at Missouri Southern, the freshman university experience or freshman orientation type class. They're all reading. What was your reaction when you found out that this book was adopted by Missouri Southern to share with their students?
I was absolutely thrilled beyond words. I couldn't believe it. It's funny being an Australian. Sometimes we think that we're a little island at the bottom of the world, and sometimes we think that perhaps what we have to say is quite different to what the rest of the world is thinking. But then, when something like this happens, you realize that, we all are really going through the same thing. We're all having the same experiences. Experiences are universal. And so that was really wonderful. And talking to students today, I found that it really is true, even though I think that, my experiences are personal and mine. They're not really. We all go through the same things. So we have so much to learn from each other.
And you can see a direct relationship then perhaps to that freshman experience of adventures and traveling perhaps to what you experienced in your book.
Absolutely. I think part of what travel really did for me was it opened me up to different ideas. And I think that's really analogous to the university experience, because you're being exposed to different ideas, different ways of thinking, and that's really exciting. And it's challenging.
Right.
So it makes you think in different ways. It makes you reevaluate, your own perspectives.
So it's a real step of growing up, I guess, in many cases. They're taking that big step in their life.
Exactly, and we're always growing up.
You never stop. You never stop learning. Well, for our viewers, a little information about the book, a memoir, and this is a story that ties into your experiences from Australia, taking the big step of going to Spain and living in Spain. All ties into your interest in flamenco dancing.
Exactly. I fell in love with flamenco dance. It's very easy to do, but I did it in my first ever class. I heard the first strum of the flamenco guitar. I thought, oh, what is that? That's exciting. I want to know where that comes from. And so I followed that sort of intuition, that frisson, that excitement, to the birthplace of flamenco. And it led me on this journey that lasted 7 years. I lived there for 7
years of living in Spain and experiencing. And then the book, as you read about those different experiences and the big step that you took, leaving Sydney, Australia, working in a department store, a lot of things that people around here can relate to. I've got a job. Talk to me about that feeling of, I'm going to really take this big step and follow through on this dream that I have.
Well, it was huge because it was, like we were talking about before, having different ideas. We're actually sitting down and saying, I'm going to be a flamenco dancer. And writing that down, I'm going to be a flamenco dancer. That is possible. I could do that. I could do something which I'd never imagined, never entered into my world. And so it was so scary and so exciting at the same time that I just had to do it because I had to know. Otherwise, I would have spent my whole life wondering,
can I really do it?
Can I really do it?
So that interest in then pursuing your dream, leaving home, I mentioned earlier, a lot of students leave college to go home. You left one continent and went all the way halfway around the world to another continent. The big step there for you and your family.
It was huge, but I think as Australians we're a little bit more used to it because we are so isolated, so to go anywhere is going to be a big step.
Right.
So, though, I don't mean to downplay the isolation and, the loneliness from my family. That was hard. It was really hard.
Right.
But I think they were very supportive, so I was lucky in that regard.
Now, flamenco dancing, people from this area, I know Missouri Southern has a Spain semester, had dancing exhibitions. What was special about that type of dance? There's a lot of different ways to express yourself through dance and art and so forth. What made that type of dancing?
That's a very interesting question. I think that it's so exotic, it's so foreign, but it's also so beautiful aesthetically, and the way that the dancers dress, the bright colors, the ruffles, the polka dots. The movement is very beautiful, the way they move their hands, the arms, is very expressive. But I think there are a lot of beautiful things in the world. What really spoke to me was the passion the force. It's a very aggressive dance in many ways, without being violent.
Right.
So it forces you to be in the moment and to be in the earth, which was huge for me because I was a girl who'd sort of always been a little bit floaty, you know. So that really made me get down and earthy.
So the dancing changed you as far as your personality and your approach?
I think so. Yeah, I think it made me feel more grounded, more in contact with the earth. And my dance teachers in the early days, even in the later days, were always saying, get down lower, feel it. Okay. And that was sort of harder for me because I just always want to float away. So
dance becomes a personal experience. You're a part of, you're not just performing, it becomes a part of your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's very liberating because most dance forms, women are led by men, right. And even in ballet, though to a lesser extent, but particularly the Latin dances, tango, salsa, ballroom. But flamenco is one dance where a woman comes out on stage and she is passionate and she's strong and she's alone. And that's really fabulous. And so I really took so much from that. It's a very liberating experience, dancing.
So through dancing, you became a different person?
Definitely, definitely. It changed my sense of self, but also the way I relate to the space around me.
Okay.
Which I think is an expression a lot of dancers go through, an experience.
And when you're dancing, of course, you're getting a lot yourself out of it. How do you feel that you're communicating with the audience? You're dancing in front of an audience or with people watching you?
And this is part of what I love about flamenco is that it's very spontaneous and very interactive. So, in a classic sort of tableau situation, you'll have a dancer, guitarist, singer, perhaps clapping.
Right.
And perhaps that's it. And so you're interacting with them, but you're also interacting with an audience who's very close. And the audience will often be clapping along or, shouting out ole or toma que toma or whatever.
Becoming part of the dancing itself.
Exactly. So you sort of feed off each other. And then they talk about this magical moment, duende, when it all comes together and you're all in this one moment and the band and the dancer and the audience are carried away to this sort of transcendent moment. And that I experienced as an audience member. And that really cemented my passion. I thought, what is this? I have to feel this again.
So it really unites everyone who's there. It's a uniting type of performance and
I think so.
Art expression. So by being in the audience and being taken into it, then you take the other side of being one of the performers. When you're performing, do you feel that my goal is to try to reach out to these people as well that are watching and get them involved?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a different attitude to performance. And something I loved in Madrid was that of an evening I could go to a bar and everyone just comes to a flamenco bar,
right?
Whoever they may be, and sit around and talk and share stories, and these become songs. Someone takes a guitar, someone starts to play, someone starts to clap. And before you know it, someone's up and dancing. And then you're living this dance experience. And there was this man I met in Madrid who was he used to carry luggage at the airport.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he'd come and sing every evening in the flamenco bars, had this incredible voice, and then ended up becoming a very successful flamenco singer.
Someone you probably would never have suspected, the man who's helping you at the airport with your luggage suddenly, pursues his interest.
It's extraordinary. There's not this sort of barrier of us normal people and them artists. It's we're all making art. Life is art. It's all one.
Tying together and pursuing that.
Yeah.
So the theme of your book, it's a foot-stomping firecracker of a memoir about food, flamenco, and falling in love. Obviously focusing on the dancing, but the food aspect, there's so many different aspects when you look at a culture. And traveling to Spain as you did, food was a big aspect too. Coming, I imagine, from Australia to Spain and big changes that you went through.
Huge. In Spain, I like to say I learned how to eat. Because, you have to learn. We're not necessarily born understanding how to appreciate food. And I'd come from I'd had a very strict understanding of what is appropriate
According to
our
culture, this is what you eat, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I was a vegetarian and I was a vegan, so I didn't eat any.
There were a lot of things that were on the no list, right?
Exactly, more on the no than on the yes. And I didn't eat white flour or white sugar or drink alcohol or anything. And of course in Spain, then what do you eat?
There's not many choices when you look at a menu, and I think you mentioned that in your book. You go to a restaurant, what is there here to eat?
Chickpeas, that's it. So, you know, I gradually sort of relaxed and started to understand that food is a part of life. Food is a celebration, just like, you know, dance is. And that I shouldn't be denying myself that because someone told me it's healthy. You know, why? So
you're able to make your own decisions then based on those experiences of trying things for the first time.
Exactly, exactly. Because that's why it's so important to step out of your culture and your belief system and start to break down some of those barriers. And that's what I found.
And through your travels and your experience. And I know you talked this morning, we had a presentation, you were talking about, you know, just why don't you? A lot of that attitude of, I haven't done it before, but let's give it a try.
Exactly, exactly. Why don't you sort of step out of your comfort zone? Why don't you try it? You may not like it. It's okay.
But at least give it a try. Do you find that, you know, this book being read by freshmen at the university level is an appropriate aspect perhaps for them, that they're meeting new people, they're trying new things for the first time, maybe they will also travel abroad. Give it a try.
Exactly. I think, you know, when you're young, it's really important to try different things to see what it is that you like, to see what's yours. Because, you know, we grow up with so much baggage, really, you know, with ideas that other people put on us. So it's really important to just test those out and say, well, is this really me? Perhaps I'm someone else. Perhaps I like different things. And so travel's a great way of testing that out.
And trying that and putting that together. Going to the book, when you first arrived in Spain, I remember reading that section of the book and just the aspect of going through customs. You spent some time talking about, you know, what it's like to show up, I guess, with your baggage at customs. And baggage beyond just all these suitcases, but your life and everything that's been up to that point before you start entering this new culture.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it. I think customs for an Australian is a big thing because we're an island and, you know.
Everybody has to come in through customs, right?
Yeah. And I was amazed by how relaxed the Spanish are. And that was sort of my introduction to this culture where, you know, it's don't worry, be happy. Everything's going to be okay.
And that took some adjustment then, going from the lifestyle that you had to a culture where laid back, the different types of approaches to life.
Exactly, exactly. I found that quite confronting at first because I expected everything to be rigid and regimented like I was used to. So to find people who say, it's okay, take your time. Like, for example, my first couple of days, I kept trying to find a place that would serve takeaway coffee. Because I wanted to grab a coffee on the run.
Like we do, we're going to grab a cup and go to work. Yeah.
Exactly. But people would say, no, calm down, it's okay. You want a coffee? Have a coffee. Sit down. It'll take you 15 minutes. People will wait.
Enjoy it.
People will wait for me, but that's that wonderful attitude.
I can imagine from a lot of our American students that are reading this book, they can relate to that lifestyle, that here, like I said, you drive through the coffee shop and pick up your cup of coffee, go to school, go to work. You don't take time to really savor the moment in many cases.
You don't, and it's, you know, a trap that you fall into in your everyday life because you're so focused on what you need to get through rather than what you want to get out of life and out of an experience. So, you know, that's something that we always need to keep reminding ourselves, this life is for me, you know, and to take these moments. Yeah.
Now the cultural differences, the food, the music, of course the language, obviously, a lot of challenges. I imagine that first, as we say in the book, some of the challenges encountering just speaking to people or communicating, those different adjustments. And sometimes people see those things as hurdles, that I can't go there, I don't know the language, you know, or I don't know, you know, the food types or the times to eat and so forth. How do you keep that determination to say, I can continue to succeed even though I run into these roadblocks?
With great difficulty. You know, it's really hard when you're sort of always testing yourself and it's like everything is new. A sensation that I sometimes felt was like walking through water. You know, you've always got, you know, language barriers, cultural barriers, just not knowing what's going on.
Right.
So that's where, you know, being driven by something like art, like, you know, like a love of a culture or like curiosity can feed you and can keep you going.
So that was always your motivation, that I'm here, I'm learning dancing, even though I have these challenges, I want to continue doing this.
Exactly, yeah. And then that also, you know, became fed by other things like, you know, love of the people I was meeting and, you know, this extraordinary country. And as I started to learn the language, the beauty of the language, which became like a friend. But it doesn't happen automatically. I think you just have to recognize early that there will be challenges, and that's okay.
That's okay. It takes time. Obviously, you spent a number of years there for that time for everything to develop and come together. You mentioned the people, and Spain is a country that Missouri Southern's focused on for the theme semester, and the diversity within a country such as Spain, and you relate to this in your book, that there's no really stereotypical Spaniard.
That's very true. There are so many different cultures, and that's how I managed to stay there for so long and just be continually fascinated, because the country is so enigmatic, because there are so many different regions with their own cultures, histories, languages, and so there's so much going on beneath the surface that, when you think you know it, you realize that you're only just starting to discover what's really there.
Something new comes up that you hadn't considered.
Exactly. Or someone tells you you're doing whatever it is you're doing completely wrong. So, yeah.
So the people that you met and that you write about in the book were really, they were welcoming you. You became part of their circle, social circle that you felt like you were comfortable over there meeting other people and working with them.
Absolutely. I was very, very lucky. I think perhaps because I came, with this unbridled enthusiasm, this sort of young girl ready to try everything. Lots of people came along to help me in my journey. Say, maybe go that way, not that way, or just to show me different things, to say, try this, try that. So that really made it such a special time.
And in your book you mention a friend that you met early on from another culture as well, and being able to have someone who maybe is going through the same sort of experience that you're doing, kind of a peer support.
Yeah, that was wonderful. I had this wonderful friendship with another girl who I met in dance class very early on. And we were able to sort of share a lot of our perspectives on things that we didn't understand, like the extraordinary lifestyle, like the way people were so relaxed about life, which neither of us were used to, coming from big cities and big pressure and stress. And we sort of went through that seduction period together of relaxing.
Did you find that type of peer support was very beneficial to you, that I'm not alone in this, there's somebody else who feels the same way?
I think really it was essential. So I think a lot of people are afraid of traveling alone. But I think what is important to remember is that you're not going to be alone for long. You meet people on the way. You have other travelers who join you in your path. And those friendships last a lifetime. They're really, really special.
So you still keep in touch with those people that you met at those experiences?
Absolutely, absolutely. Very, very special friends.
And so being able to share what you have to look at. The students who have read the book, I know I have a class of students who have read this book, and they have a lot of different variety of questions. And I guess one of the questions they've asked is, well, when did you decide, after all these experiences, to write the book? So for our audience on television, at what point did you say, I'm having some experiences that maybe I can share with others?
Oh, well, it's funny. It's actually a funny story. I never imagined that I would write a book. That was a complete fluke. Actually, what happened was I was broke and I needed to find a job, and I didn't speak Spanish. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? Well, I thought maybe I could get a job serving coffee in a newspaper office somewhere. So I wrote down some of my experiences in article form, sent them off hoping just to get a little
feedback response, right?
Something. And one was picked up by a newspaper, and before I knew it, I had a phone call asking me to turn it into a book. And so that began the story.
The story. Right.
And I said yes.
And I've read it. And the actual process of writing, some students are curious, how long does it, to write even a memoir like this, how long does it take to go through that process of my ideas to paper to actual publication?
It takes quite a while. I did my first draft over a period of 6 months, which is quite short, but it was sort of putting all my thoughts down. And then after that, it was probably about 2 years of reworking, rewriting and, rethinking things and fixing the structure. And
so there's a lot of fine-tuning involved when you're working on something like this.
Exactly, fine-tuning.
As we would say, editing in the world of editing.
Yeah.
So as a writer, you need to keep that end goal in mind as well. That, I'm not going to give up, even though I'm facing these challenges of it's not quite what I want, or it's not quite what the editor wants.
I think that's very true. I think when you're trying to write something, you have this image of the perfect paragraph or chapter or book, and then you write whatever it is that you write, and it doesn't, match what you'd envisaged. But you have to remember that that's just the beginning of the process. Then you work with that, and the words speak to you, and the story comes out. So it takes time.
Takes some time. And now, when you're writing, do you share this with others to read? You know, pick up this up. Does this make sense? Am I heading in the right direction? How do you as a writer look for feedback from the potential readers?
Oh, look, I have a couple of trusted friends who help me with it. And then it's hard because as a writer, I'm very sensitive about my own work.
Right.
So even though I think it's terrible, no one else can tell me that.
So feedback's important, but you want to make sure that your creation is still being created by you. Right.
Well, you know, I find it hard, but hard criticism is the best kind. But I try and have a glass of wine before I read it.
Right.
Helps.
Working that together. So the ultimate goal, you have the book published, it's being distributed, and of course we're here in the United States, but you know, worldwide people are reading these adventures. Do you think that's international is a story for anyone around the world? Australia, United States, Germany, France, anywhere someone could relate to these types of themes that we've been talking about?
I think so. I think, you know, we all go through this, you know, these experiences of falling in love with a different idea and sort of trying to see if perhaps we can envisage ourselves in a different way. Reinvention. And, you know, it's a scary process, but it's an exciting process. And you learn so much along the way, and, you know, you make mistakes.
Right.
So I think that these are very universal themes. So yeah, I think, you know, traveling to Spain is a very romantic idea. And you see that because in Spain, in Madrid in particular, there are girls from all over the world who are dancing flamenco, from Mexico to Germany to China to Mongolia to wherever. So I think we're all drawn by the same impulse, this impulse to explore a different, perhaps more passionate side of ourselves. So yeah. Yeah, and tie that all together. And when it comes to traveling, as you mentioned earlier in the program, traveling being an international emphasis as well, that people go beyond your comfort zone of maybe just going across to the next state line here in the United States, that look around the world as well. Yeah, I think what's so exciting is trying something completely different. Picking yourself up and placing yourself in a different environment where nothing is the way you expect, you know, sort of upside down world, right. Alice in Wonderland, no? And then just sort of seeing, you know, how you respond. And that's exciting because, you know, who knows, you might like it. And I know for Missouri Southern with our students that a lot of them do have the opportunity for international studies, and I've heard it said that after a student studies abroad, they come back as a different person. Can you relate to that? That after even just a short-term trip abroad, people come back different? Well, exactly. And my first trip to Spain was a short trip, but it changed me forever. After that, seeing that, I thought, oh, I can't go back to living the way I'd lived before. Do you know what I mean? Right. It was, you know, I'm a different person now. Yeah, an eye-opener. Yeah, tying that together. Well, for the future, people are probably curious. Do you have other books in the work? What are you doing now? You know, the questions people, you've written the book, you've had this adventure. What's happening in your life now? Well, actually, while I was writing this book, I spent the last 6 months of the process writing in a farmhouse in Galicia, which is a little region in the north of Spain. Right. And I fell in love with that part of Spain, which is a very undiscovered corner. So my new project is writing a history of that region. Okay. And it's actually quite fascinating because it's a Celtic kingdom. So you wouldn't expect that in Spain. No, exactly. Right. Exactly. So being a Celt myself, you know, I feel a real connection with those people and that culture. And so, yeah, that's what I'm working on at the moment. Part memoir, part history. So helping to tell their story to the rest of the world. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite untold. And so being able to share other people's stories through your experiences, and I'm sure even within this book, you're sharing other people's stories, their culture, through your experiences. Yes, yes. And, you know, there's always that thing where I think, well, this is sort of my perspective. But then I guess, you know, it's always going to be a little bit of a mix. Right. You know, an Australian's view of Spain. Well, what tips would you have for some, in the future? We have students at the university, we have students here in the studio that are thinking about, you know, what's your tip for how do you pursue your dreams? So, you know, you're at that point in your life where you can look to the future. We have your website up there now where people can go to as well. But, you know, and obviously get more information for that. But, you know, if someone were to come to you and say, you know, what are your tips for me to succeed in the future for students? Well, I think my biggest tip is listen to yourself. That sounds like a cliche. Be on the alert for those little hints, those little feelings that you sometimes feel. Perhaps if you feel a particular connection to a culture, a language, you know, a piece of music. What is that? Be a detective of your own life. find what it is that you like by exploring every sort of avenue, if you like. And don't be afraid, because, or be afraid, fine.
Afraid is okay, but you can overcome those fears, right?
Exactly. I'm afraid throughout the book, I'm afraid throughout my travels, but don't let that stop you, because life is there to be enjoyed and to be experienced. And yeah,
good tips.
Have fun.
Have fun. And this is something, of course, we're talking about college students, but at any age, you're never too old, I guess, to continue to seek adventure.
No, I'm still going.
So even people, as we hear a lot of times, retirees, as they, what am I going to do after this next phase of my life? They could pursue these types of interests as well.
Well, we're always reinventing ourselves, and I think that's just what keeps us young, what keeps us engaged. I hope to still be finding new things when I'm in my 90s.
So, well, I'd like to thank you very much for coming and sharing. And you mentioned your presentations at Missouri Southern. Are you feeling that, obviously you're sharing with the audience, is the audience in turn sharing or giving you as well and back?
Oh, it's wonderful. The students here are really inspiring. They come from different places and perspectives, and they have such unique perspectives on where they want to go. And I think that that's really special. And, you know, they're at an age where they have so much ahead of them. And, you know, I sort of envy that a little. But, you know, I'm still...
You're still young. You still have the opportunities.
And I'm still reinventing myself.
Right.
So I think, you know, it's a really exciting program that you have here.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you for visiting with us while you've been at Missouri Southern and sharing with our audience today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. I hope you can join us again next week at the same time on the station. We'll see you then.